Welcome in, Minnesota high school football fans. We are back again. I'm Caleb Casa. I'm here with Coach Lantz. And the schedule release just happened for 6A. I think it was Friday. It kind of got out there with team Instagram pages and stuff like that. So we're going to be here to break that down, and we'll break down a lot more upcoming. Coach Lantz, thanks for joining me again. How you doing?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for having me back. Just got back from some football clinics that we had both Friday evening and this morning. Today is Saturday, so Saturday morning, and had an absolute blast. Always learning and connecting. So just getting ready for next season. Whole lot of fun things coming up this 6A season for us.
So take your time out the top to do a little bit more introducing of yourself, not just personally, but like social media wise. This is your plug. I forgot it last time. So here you go.
All good. Yeah, you can follow me, Coach Lantz, on YouTube. Funny enough, I was actually planning on doing an STMA versus Mounds View breakdown because that was one of the games I wanted to look at because they're both good defensive teams for this weekend. Then Thursday, I get the schedule dropped and we play Mounds View week 1. I'm like, great. So I guess I can't look at them now on stream. Might give some things away, but yeah, and obviously follow me on Instagram too, Coach Ryan Lantz. That's where I pretty much do all my posting. Any updates, I'll put it over there. Anytime I'm streaming, I'll give notification over there first. And the YouTube link is also in my Instagram account and vice versa with my YouTube account back to Insta. So go give it a follow.
You heard it here. He's got really good stuff. I think the first episode was just, I wanted you on because I kind of represent like the viewers or the average person kind of following, and way more than me. I strive to get to your knowledge level one day. That's why I keep having you on. But yes, go give him a follow. He's got awesome stuff, and I appreciate him giving all this information that is very interesting. Let's get into one of the burning things kind of going across the league right now, or the state, I should say, and that is the Osseo head coaching situation.
Oh, yeah.
Stockhouse, that's how you say it, right? Yeah,
Yep.
I got that right.
Ryan Stockhouse, yep.
Yeah, he was the coach, and Star Tribune article came out. He is resigning. I'm not necessarily the exact reason. I didn't read or get into that.
I
But
think he said it
regardless,
was to pursue an admin position, so like assistant principal, dean, activities director, community ed director, something along those lines.
okay, so that is the sole vacancy in 6A for right now, head coaching wise. And there's been a lot of speculation, a lot of rumors being had. One of those rumors being Darren Lamker, who is the current coach from Augsburg University. There's been talks about him potentially doing both, doing one or the other. These are all like rumors that are just out there. Nothing has been confirmed. Nothing has been set in stone. So for all we know, there is still a head coaching vacancy at Osseo. That's the rumor is Lamker maybe going to returning. Right, he was former Osseo head coach. He won a state championship with them.
He did. I want to say it was actually the inaugural season of the 6A state tournament. He beat Eastridge on a last-second touchdown, 14-13. So, and Osseo had like huge linemen back then, loaded with athletes. I know it's kind of hard to believe nowadays, but back then, Osseo used to absolutely smash Maple Grove, and now it's a little bit more inverted.
Tides have turned.
Yeah. But, maybe he can bring a spark back to Osseo. I know with open enrollment, you have kids kind of going between those 3 Osseo schools, between Park Center, Osseo, and Maple Grove. Maybe he can draw some of that player base back to Osseo High School. I know they were, 0-8, and then they lost to EP in the first round, 2023. Last year, they got some good wins. They had that double OT win at STMA, running GH counter all over the place. That was a blast. I think they smashed Coon Rapids too, right?
Yeah, they had an underwhelming season, but the playoffs, it was kind of surprising that Egan was good last year, and I was expecting them to kind of get like run out of the stadium by Egan, but so it was a good game.
Definitely, yeah. Egan, I mean, we've played Egan a whole lot. They're very physical, but if you can compete with their physicality and keep their offense off the field, then that's not the style of football they like to play. It's kind of like the same thing with like a Centennial or an Eden Prairie. if they're not on the field, they can't control time of possession. That wears their defense down, and it just creates all kind of problems for them. And then if they have to play from behind, it's even worse because then that just completely throws them off their schedule.
Yeah. So that's for what we know. I asked somebody like very close to the situation, and I gave him 3 options. I said, "What are the chances of him doing both? Okay, doing just Osseo or doing just Augsburg? What do you think is going to happen?" And he said that he would choose just Osseo. So although there has been rumors of both, that's kind of what I've been hearing and digging around. The rumor is definitely out there, and talking just to people and trying to get information on it. It's kind of run rampant across the state, and people definitely know about it. I'm not sure the general public knows about it, but yeah, so that's an interesting situation to just monitor. Just the last thing was I heard there was going to be more information this coming week about how it's going to go down.
Definitely, yeah. I mean,
But
just even the
I did hear
logistics
that
of
last
having to
week too.
coach, like I just logistic wise, I don't know how you manage to coach both a college and a high school team. Like, you played football at Augsburg. Suppose you have like a team meeting or like a walkthrough Friday night, and your coaching staff can't be there because they're over having to play like at Andover or something on a Friday night. So
Yeah,
I
interesting. And the first person that brought it up to me, I was like, "There's no chance you can do that." Just like you said, the timing, the organizing that you'd have to do, and then you're kind of like juggling between 2 teams. That doesn't sound like even like if I was hiring a coach, I wouldn't want them to do that. And then I think one of the other people I was talking to was like, "Is that even legal with the NCAA like regulations in terms of like recruiting?" I didn't even think about that, but that was something that somebody brought up to me when talking about it, and I was, that is an interesting thing that I didn't even think of when originally thinking about the situation. But
Oh yeah. I mean, like you said, there's so many different angles to this, so many different rules and regulations and like you said, different bodies. NCAA might have policies, Minnesota State High School League might have their policies on it. I guess everything will just have to check out, and like you said, eventually we'll find out. So
we will indeed. Let's get into. I've been receiving a lot of messages from just lower class players of wondering when their schedule's being released. I know 6A was released like we talked about on Friday. Players messaging and wondering, not just players, probably parents as well, getting giddy at the schedule release of the lower classes. What do you got for information on that?
definitely. So I guess we can kind of talk about how schedules are put together. So for 6A, it's easy because it's just 32 teams, and 6A doesn't play outside of 6A. I think we speculated last time that the Maroon teams had requested to play 5A games. This actually happened after our last episode because we recorded that on Monday. And then I think Tuesday, I heard that Hopkins had actually had a meeting on Monday with the other ADs and had requested, like, hey, can we play 5A since we only have 4 Maroon games? State High School League said, no, you're going to play 6A.
Which that situation has happened before, like we've talked about in the previous pod. That I know Forest Lake was one that did that. I think you mentioned another one, but that is something that has happened.
Coon Rapids and Brainerd in the 21-22 cycle. So they were classified in 6A and they played 6A playoffs, but regular season they played a 5A schedule. Other than when they matched up against each other, which I think was like week 2. The whole game's on YouTube somewhere. I'd have to go find it.
Gotcha.
But yeah, and 6A is way easier. It's like we said, not only is there no crossover with other classes, 4 athletic directors, I don't know all 4, I know at least one of them though, but the 4 athletic directors all come together and they just sit down and they put all the schedules together. And they only, I guess, we can go over one of these 2 rules because I think they might be trying to spite us over at the State High School League. So the one rule is you have to have 6 section games and then 2 cross-section games. So like Lakeville South, for example, we play the other 6 teams in the Metro South Division. So yeah, we can pull up the section graphic there. So get Eastview instead of them. We'll play Egan, Farmington, Rosemount, North, Prior Lake, and Chaco. So those are our 6 section games, and then every team gets 2 non-section games. So ours, we have Mounds View week 1, and then I want to say week 6 we play at Edina. So those are our 2 cross-section games because they're in different sections. So that's
6 plus
generally
2 equals 8.
there you go. So there's all 8 games in the regular season. Perfect. But the reason that's easy is because, like we said, there's no crossover. You just take those 32 teams, you follow that schedule, and then the other funny thing was we talked about how generally there's no repeat cross-section matchups like from cycle to cycle. Because, like I said last time, Lakeville South is extremely unlikely or borderline impossible to play Wayzata or Champlin because those were our non-section games last time. And the 2 games you and I specifically mentioned were Centennial Rosemount, and you brought up the rivalry of Forest Lake Prior Lake. And we were kind of like, oh, sadly, it's probably not going to happen because they're cross-section. And the only 2 repeat cross-section games we got on the schedule were those exact 2 that we brought up. So I don't know if they're throwing shade, but it is what it is. So, but yeah, that's how 6A works. So going to 5A and below, kind of like you brought up, you start to see some cross-class play. Like, so we'll go to 5A because I think one of the comments specifically mentioned 5A. So there's as you mentioned, there's 43. Yep, there it is. When 5A out. So there's 43 teams in 5A. And as Caleb mentioned, well, if you have 42 all play each other, that gives you 21 games. But then who's the 43rd team play? Well, Duluth East doesn't play any 5A teams in the regular season. They play all the 4A and 3A teams that are up in that northeast section. So like your Hermantown 4A, Grand Rapids 4A, Denfeld 4A. And it's not only them. Some other 5A teams might mix in a 4A game here. Like I think some Two Rivers might have played Simley last year. That's a 5A 4A matchup. But what happens when you start crossing over classifications? Well, okay, now if Duluth East is going to play all these 4A teams, now we have to schedule 4A at the same time. Or like Duluth East ESCO week 1. That's a 5A and a 3A. So now you got to do 3A as well. So it's not the same as 6A where it's just 4 ADs come together and can crank out the whole thing in like one evening. There's a lot more going on, a lot more people involved because you're dealing with so many schools. Instead of just 32 teams, you're now dealing with just about everybody else outside of 9-man, so 5A all the way to 1A, and all the athletic directors that are involved in that process. So there's a lot of communication going on, but that'll probably come by the end of May if I had to guess, because when I coached at Jefferson, that was about when we would get our schedules.
And is 5A released with 4A, 3A, 2A, 1A, and 9-player, or does it go by, is 5A going to be next, and then 4A, and then 3A, or does it all just get dropped at once?
Generally, they'll drop it all at once, because like we said, if there is a crossover game, like suppose Duluth East schedule gets dropped, and week 1 they're playing Hermantown, well, Hermantown's a 4A team, and they're like, oh, well, we know one of our games. Gotcha. Where's the rest of our schedule at?
Right.
So, yeah, I think 9-man might be different because, like we said, they're kind of like 6A. 9-man doesn't have any crossover games. How many 9-man teams are there, though? There's a lot. There's 60. So, yeah, that'll take a little bit more time than 6A to put together, but that's generally released separately from classes 1A through 5A.
I don't have this comment pulled up, but this is going in kind of staying on the same topic, but getting a little out. If I don't bring it up now, I'm going to forget it. But it was, I think, talking about like playoff matchups and how the best teams get in. I don't know if you saw this, but I think the solution was, I want to say he talked about just taking the top 32 of the lower classes. So this brings up my question to you: is everybody gets in round 1 in 6A? Are there teams left off of playoffs in 5A, 4A, 3A, and 2A, or is everybody in and then the section goes from there?
So everybody's in and the section goes from there. They started to experiment a little bit last year, and I don't remember if it was 9-man or 1A. I want to say it might have been in Minnesota's section. Instead of having like an 8 seed matchup against a 5 seed and so on with that, they actually had the 7 and 8 play each other and just take them out of the section playoffs. So then you would just have like the 6 teams left that actually might be able to compete for a section. So then you'd have 3-6 and 4-5. Winner of 4-5 would play the 1. Winner of 3-6 plays the 2, and then that's kind of just the little section bracket. And then whoever wins that mini bracket, because like we said, there's those 8 sections outside of 6A. Whoever wins that gets one of those spots in the state tournament, which is just one team from each of those 8 sections.
Okay. Because I think that was a YouTube comment, I want to say, talking about it. And I was like, well, if we do want the best 32 teams in, regardless of section, that would be one way to do it. Everybody plays the regular season, take the top 32, then use 6A's kind of format with all the levels, just with the top 32 teams from the regular season. I was like, when I read that, I was like, oh, that could be an option. Then it's just, you don't want to rob the teams of games, because in football, games are so valuable. We only have 8 regular season, and most only play 9. There's only so many players that actually get to go to state. Most everybody's done playing football pretty early on, and you just don't want to try to make it a better viewing experience and then rob these players from getting filmed to potentially like send to college coaches or anything like that. That was the one thing that I thought, is that, would that be, when you're weighing the options, would you rather have a better viewing experience or value like the players playing games? I think there could be a happy medium, like you were talking about. There's things like winners and losers brackets that we can do, to not rob these players specifically of playing more games, but we can also get the top 32 teams in regardless of sections. I don't know who commented on that in the last YouTube video, but shout out to them. It was a good thought exercise.
That's definitely a nice idea. So I think that's a good idea.
Shoot holes in it. Yeah.
Okay.
Where would they fire back?
The state high school league would probably say big no to that. So I know, like, we were talking about some of the 5A sections. Like, I think it's section 5 in 5A had St. Louis Park, Jefferson, Kennedy, Minneapolis Southwest, and Minneapolis Washburn. Like, and I was talking with some coaches in 5A about this, because they were saying, hey, why is it there's like easy sections where like a CDH or St. Thomas just get a walk-in? Meanwhile, you have like Elk River Andover in a 60-point dogfight, or Moorhead Alexandria, like you said, could be the 5A state title, and only one of those teams makes it to state. I believe the State High School League's official stance is they want to have geographical diverse representation. So they don't just want like all the big suburban schools to be represented. They want to make sure that all these other things, like if you think about St. Louis Park, they're like on the cusp of inner city, them and the Bloomington schools. So even though you're right, they'll probably get put as a 4th seed in the state tournament, probably like a North 4 seed. Then they would have to play North 1, which would be, probably Elk River, Alexandria next year. So might not be that good of a game round 1, but at least those kids get the experience of making it to state, which, I mean, you want to give all the kids the equal opportunity. It's not fair to like send a kid to a program like, hey, here's your high school. We have no shot of making state. Go play football and have fun. Like, it's, yeah, you want to give them at least some hope. Let the kids have fun. So, but like you said, that seems like a partial happy medium. And then maybe those other teams that are outside of it, you could do like a consolation tournament almost, because you think of like hockey and basketball, they have consolation brackets for all the teams that lose. Like, wasn't there like a consolation hockey game between South and, I don't remember who we play after we choked against Moorhead, but yeah, there you get, and like you said, it keeps the kids playing for a little bit longer. Obviously, it's a little easier with hockey and basketball. There's not as much like game planning, I would say, that goes into it, because it's like, all right, now we got to go watch film on this team. How do they prepare for us? What are their tendencies? What's their coach's background? Like,
yep.
Do they have like an offensive-minded coach like a Jason Potts? Or are they more of a defensive-minded coach like an Aaron Moberg? Like, there's just so much that goes into football compared to other sports. So
one more thing on this topic. Could we expand it out from 32, because these classes are bigger than 6A? So making it a 32 team tournament is essentially eliminating quick math. Like, what do we say? 43 were in class 5A for like officially. So that would only leave like 11 or 12 out around there of like the state tournament, which you could say that they didn't have a chance, but also it's not like they were relegated to that anyways. I mean,
Hmm.
that's what that makes the regular season important. I think some of the times in 6A, you're like, well, we lost the regular season game, but we're still going to have a chance in the playoffs anyways. I think it could be a way of making the regular season just a little bit more, what's the word, important.
Yeah, I
And,
see what you mean.
you know, I think that could be an option. And the way the sections work out of those two teams, well, whichever, not two exact teams, but we talked about how the section, the the lower classes play back to back, or like the Tuesday Saturday slot. I think there could be just options to kick around. It wouldn't be a podcast if I didn't try to pick holes in the Minnesota high school football tournament and try to make it a better viewing experience. So there it is. We can move on from there. We talked about why the lower class schedules aren't out, and you said the end of May was around when you're expecting that to be sort of released.
Yep, pretty much. When I was at Jefferson, like some point in May, mid to late May, or even early June, that's generally the timeline. And like we said, that's just because you have so many athletic directors across 1A through 5A all having to work in conjunction with each other.
Okay. So now getting into just 6A, and we're going to explain sections and in-season conferences. And
Yes.
also district, I think, is interchangeable with in-season conference.
Correct.
So here's the graphic that we used for the section placement of 6A. So you can see section 3, 4, 5, and 6. It doesn't start at 1 because they're all metro. I learned that in the first podcast. So that is why 3, 4, 5, and 6 are that. Then just the ones that are blue are the ones that have changed and kind of bounced in different sections from the 2 years ago's realignment.
Yep.
So that's why they're highlighted blue. Then we get into the only real change in the regular season conferences from the playoff sections is if teams requested schedule relief. So they're in a section and they want to play. You explain that. Go for it.
Definitely. So teams request schedule relief because they're not, I don't want to say able to handle the competition, but we'll say they're rebuilding. It's a very polite word. Good programs, they're rebuilding right now. So when we did our first video at the time, the only 4 teams in 6A that I knew of that had requested schedule relief, which is, like we say, they just get scheduled against each other and against easier opponents because, like, for example, a Hopkins might not be able to stack up against a Shakopee or a Minnetonka. So it just makes it a little bit more enjoyable for the kids. They don't have to get out and get blown out like 70-0. Or what was the Shakopee score from 2023 week 1? I swear it was like 72-12, something like that. But
well, in terms of that too, it's also not like a lot, and not all of them, but some of these guys just can't hang like enrollment wise with like the top schools, and that also goes into play of some of the bigger schools are just blessed with like just having talent easier. And like I'm looking at this, there's talent on these schools. Like Hopkins
oh,
was
definitely.
one of the younger teams last year that kind of surprised people because they haven't won a game in how long. And then they just got athletes all over the board and they make noise last season. So it's not the fact that, requesting schedule relief. There's teams that have been, I know Forest Lake has been one in the past to do it. The only difference between this regular season schedule for the Maroon and season district is the 2 teams that went down were part of the Maroon 6A division. Is
Yes,
that right?
Buffalo and Burnsville both were part of the Maroon division, so they left. And actually, there was one team that was Maroon that we did not know about because I didn't know they'd requested schedule relief, and that was Coon Rapids. So there's technically 5 Maroon teams in the 25 to 27 cycle.
Oh, snap.
Yeah, because when I first thought when it was 4, I was like, okay, the West section and section 3, the South, both only have 7 teams. I think we touched on that when we were talking about potential schedules.
Yeah.
Suppose you have like North, South, Egan, Rosemount, Prior Lake, Shakopee all matched up in a week, but then who does Farmington play? There's no division opponent left. And I'm like, okay, is that lock in that they have to have a crossover with the one team from the West that's not playing another because that they'd be in the same boat? And it was basically going to make it impossible for us to have non-section game week 1 and 8, and then all in conference games weeks 2 through 7. But then I found out Coon Rapids is in the same boat. So now you have 3 conferences of 7 teams. And honestly, I was like, how in the world is the State High School League going to put this all together? Because I just saw no clean way to do it without like having to kind of mix things around. And honestly, I think the mixing around they did is actually giving us one of the most interesting 6A schedules we've ever seen. I mean, we've got crossover matchups every single week of the season almost.
Yeah. So, hey, breaking news to me live that Coon Rapids is a part of the Maroon regular season conference. I like to say regular season conference because that helps my mind a little bit more.
That is correct. So even like I think it was Skullhole Productions or whatever he's called on Instagram put out like the graphics saying like, hey, here's the East, here's the North, here's the South. And I think he was mixing up sections and conferences because like if you want to go back to the sections really fast. So like for example, I'll go section 3 because that's mine. So even though Section 3 is those 8 teams, the Metro South Division is only 7 teams. You get Eastview out of there because they're not in the Metro South. They're in the Metro Maroon Division. But for playoffs, they're in Section 3 with the 7 Metro South teams, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah.
And the other thing that I did not mention with those Maroon teams that requested schedule relief, come playoff time, they are relegated to an automatic 7 or 8 seed. So for example, like Hopkins, Coon Rapids, and Eastview, they are the only Maroon teams in their section of 8 teams. All the 7 others didn't request schedule relief, but those 3 did. So what that means is week 1 in the playoffs, all 3 of those teams are going to be 8 seeds going to a 1 seed. And it can't be in the same section. So like, for example, suppose hypothetical Minnetonka is the 1 seed out of section 6. Hopkins, just based on the way the brackets, the pre-made brackets are drawn up, Hopkins would not go to them. They'd go to the 1 seed out of one of the other sections, whether that be Forest Lake, Lakeville South, or Shakopee, or whoever.
Gotcha. All right. That makes sense.
And I think the only difference really fast with that is because, so Coon Rapids, Hopkins, and Eastview would be 8. Park and Cottage Grove, if you want to go back to sections, Park, Cottage Grove, and Roseville are both in Section 4 there. So they will be relegated to seeds 7 and 8, and whichever one of them is voted on by the coaches as the better Maroon team will get the 7th seed, and the worst of the 2 will get the 8th seed. And then the other 6 teams, Woodbury, White Bear, Stillwater, Mounds View, Forest Lake, and Eastridge, will get ranked 1 through 6.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I was surprised when I was putting it together that Coon Rapids didn't like request anything just based on how their season went last year, and then getting a new head coach. That was kind of a little bit surprising. I was like, oh, he's going into it, but that does make sense, and I think it is a good move for him. It's going to help him, and you want these guys to play competitive games. It's going to make it for more fun games from the viewing experience as well. And yeah, so you got anything more on that, or?
I guess the only other thing was, so as everyone knows, 6A section or 6A playoffs are different from all the other classes. We kind of touched on this last time, where we just play a straight up 32 team tournament. Because I was reading, I think it was a Minnesota Star Tribune article that just came out yesterday. And it was talking about, I just have it pulled up on my other screen over here. It was talking about how, oh yeah, there's all these class realignments. First off, it's got one little bit of misinformation. It says Apple Valley 6A and Coon Rapids is 5A. That was true, as we talked about, for about 10 days.
Right.
But as of like March 10th, that has no longer been true. And it's about a month behind, but you know, some people just, maybe they have dial-up internet, so who knows. You never know with that. But then it also said that, hey, all these teams in Section 6, your Moorhead, your Minnetonka, your Maple Grove, only one of them can make the state tournament. And technically that's not true. That's true in classes 5A through 9-man, but 6A is the one class where that's not true. If you want, I can share my screen really fast, just to show everyone the brackets really fast. So, like we said, it's a little bit different in 6A. I'll pull up this tab over here. Perfect. So like this is just one of the hypothetical brackets right here. So as you see, I kind of penciled in some of those Maroon teams we talked about. because those are the spots they're locked into. So Eastview would be there. Coon Rapids is the 8th seed of Section 5. Hopkins is the 8th seed of Section 6, because that's the caveat of them requesting schedule relief. And then as you see, so like a little bracket of 4 right there, we'll just look at this top one. They make it so that those little brackets of 4 have one team from each different section. And so the state tournament doesn't officially start until the quarterfinals right here. And if you look, one of the teams that's going to come out of there can only be from one section. So, I mean, hypothetically, all 8 teams out of one section could make the state quarterfinal. If Hopkins gets it done and wins 2 playoff games, they could take that spot there. Then the 4th seed or the 2nd seed of Section 6 could meet them in the state quarter right there, and then so on and so forth from all these little brackets of 4. So
Interesting. So that's why when we see it, the state tournament doesn't start until basically round 3, is that way we can get, for competitive reasons, if there are 2 of the best teams in the same section, that doesn't eliminate one of them if we just go section 1, 2, 3, 4.
You were correct. Yeah, that's the case for 5A and below. Like I think we mentioned Section 2 and 5A, like Chanhassen, Mankato West. One of those 2 teams is going to get eliminated and won't be able to make the state tournament. Meanwhile, in 6A, because like we talked about, we do have the bracket. You could get all 8 teams from one section meeting up in the state quarters. And yeah, to touch on what you said, like you said, state quarter starts the 3rd round. The first round is called the section semi. The second round is section final, state quarter, state semis, and then obviously state title prep bowl.
So we know that they can do it.
Yes, it hypothetically it is possible, but that would mean, like we said, that like a Hopkins, Coon Rapids, or Eastview, whatever section that 8th seed comes out of, would have to beat one. They'd have to beat a 1 seed. So, like for example, in this bracket, Hopkins would have to beat the 1 seed of Section 5, which, as we talked about, could be Centennial, Blaine, or maybe even Champlain Park at that school. So, like we said, Hopkins is doing a lot of things right. They're trending in the right direction.
Is that? Say that again. Sorry.
All good. So, so like we talked about, each of the little 4 brackets here on the outside, they have a team from each different section.
So Hopkins is playing the winner of a section that's decided already. Is that what you're telling me?
Correct. So if I scroll down a little bit here, and I can fill these in too now that we kind of know Parks /
What section
Rose.
is that?
This is Section 4. So I have them all labeled. It's like Section 3, Section 4, Section 5, Section 6, kind of like you have labeled. And these are just the teams that automatically are relegated to these seeds because they're maroon teams. They're all going to be 8th seeds. And then because Park and Roseville are both in Section 4 here, they are relegated to seeds 7 and 8. Whichever one is better will get the 7th seed, which is why I just kind of put like here Park / Rose, because it could be either of them in those spots. It all depends on how the regular season plays out.
Okay, interesting. Is there like a method to the madness of Hopkins being paired with what section was it?
So in this particular bracket, that would be Section 5.
Oh, okay. So there's 4 different brackets that it could be.
Yep. So like this bracket, so like I think we might have touched on it last time very briefly, but this is probably the most confusing part because this was my conspiracy theory. They always match up the best team against one of the weakest. So say like Shakopee goes 8-0 and they're the only undefeated team. Say maybe those teams in the West pick each other off. Then they'd probably pick this bracket because the team out of the East, whoever that may be, whether Forest Lake or Mounds View, Stillwater maybe, may not stack up as well against like say a Centennial or Minnetonka or Maple Grove over there. So they would put Shakopee at that 1 seed right there, and they would meet the weakest of the 1 seeds in the state semifinal, and they'd choose that bracket. Now, under that same assumption, suppose Shakopee is the best team, and then the second best team is Minnetonka. They win Section 6. Well, this bracket over here has them both on the same side of the bracket, and they would clash in the state semis. And obviously, you don't want the 2 best teams meeting in the state semi. So that bracket probably would not be chosen if that's how the 1 seeds play out.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that was where I went wrong. Is like I was thinking, I was just looking at one of them, but there's 4 that potentially could be because that's how many sections there are. So we don't know how they're going to like match it up necessarily, but we know the ways that the ways they will, I guess, because
Pretty
there's four of
much,
them.
yeah. So the first step is like section 3 over here. I have the seeds all listed. I think we sort of touched it. The coaches of that section. So like section 3, for example, Coach Gegenheimer, Coach Burke, Coach Erdman, Coach Vossen, Coach Johnson. Who am I forgetting? Coach Buckley. Can't forget Eastview. Um, and Coach Piper at Farmington. Can't forget Farmington. So those 8 coaches would all come together and they would just discuss like, hey, what are the section seedings? And they would go off of record. And if there's a tiebreaker, they look for a head-to-head matchup. Like I think you brought up Forest Lake and Mounds View last year. Both the teams were 6-2. So the coaches looked at, okay, who won the head-to-head tiebreaker of, so like you had like B-Scow, Moberg, Labor, Fritzy, they all would come together and talk about the seedings. They look at that head-to-head matchup and say, okay, week 3, Mounds View beat Forest Lake, so they have the same record. Mounds View owns the tiebreaker. Mounds View gets the top seed. Forest Lake drops down a seed.
Okay. Gotcha.
And then, yeah, so they vote on where all those teams fall. So like I said, it's easy to determine those maroon teams because they're automatic 8 or 7 seeds, depending on how many maroon teams are in their section. And then the coaches all have to vote based on performance here. Like I know section 4, another one that was weird was Stillwater at 4-4 was a 3 seed. And you and I kind of talked about how maybe their record wasn't quite as indicative of how good of a team they were because they were a lot of close games. Meanwhile, a 5-3 Eastridge team was right there at the 4th seed. And I know a big one that has been talked a lot about last year in Section 6, Minnetonka at 6-2 got the 1 seed, while a 7-1 Shakopee team got the 2 seed in Section 6 over there. And that's just because, like we said, those coaches all come together from Section 6. So Coach Betton, Coach Gegenheimer back then, and Coach Grant, Coach Esch, and they all said, hey, Minnetonka is the better team than Shakopee, so we want to give Minnetonka the 1 seed. Now, every coach doesn't have to unanimously agree with that, and as we know, Shakopee probably was not agreeing with that, but that's what the coaches decided. And then after all those seedings are done for all 4 of those sections, they'll take the top 1 seeds, or the 4 1 seeds, and there can only be 1 seed in each section. I think that's something that confused some of the viewers. They're like, well, why can't Minnetonka and Shakopee both be 1 seeds? It's because those sections that you showed earlier, only 1 seed can come out of those.
So only one team per section is 1 seed. And even if there is 2 really good teams in the same section, it has to be picked who's 1 and who's 2. That's why you get the program feeling like they've been robbed.
That is correct. So each of those sections, like Section 3, those teams will be ranked 1 all the way down to 8. Section 4, same thing, ranked 1 to 8. Section 5, 1 to 8, and then Section 6, 1 to 8.
That's
which is
the thing.
why
From the viewer perspective, that's really hard because, I mean, you know who teams mostly play, but again, like these aren't the in regular season schedules. So from a viewer's perspective or somebody who maybe goes to school at Shakopee or something like that, you're like, oh, we got robbed. But it's just the fact that there's a process to finding out the seeding for playoffs for competitive reasons, and that's kind of how it works. I think either way, like if a really good team gets the 2 seed, if you're really good and you should have got 1, you should be winning anyways. And it shouldn't really matter at the end of the day is how I see it. But yeah, interesting nonetheless. I'm trying, as you're saying all this, I'm like trying to absorb it into my brain as much as I can. That's why you kind of hear me processing out loud and asking you questions. But
definitely, yeah. And like you said, this is probably the most confusing part of the whole football season is the way sections and playoffs work. Like another example, we talked about like cross scheduling and 5A in the lower classes. So I know in the last cycle, Duluth East was 5A. They were 2-6, but they were given the 5 seed or 6 seed in their section below St. Francis, who was 0-8. And like we said, all those coaches, so like Coach Hamilton up at Elk River, I think there's a new coach up at Duluth East, and then DeVellis at Andover, all those guys would come together and they all seeded. And I think what they decided was, St. Francis played a full 5A schedule. Duluth East's 2 wins this past season, were against 3A teams, and then they lost 6 games to 4A teams And so most of them gave St. Francis that nod because, they're playing these better 5A schools. Even though they didn't win a game, we're giving them the benefit of the doubt. And
Hmm.
obviously, Duluth East is going to feel cheated because, hey, we won 2 games. Why is a team
Right.
that did not win a single game getting seated higher than us? But like we said, it really, just kind of comes down to how those coaches vote and see it.
Gotcha. Well, very good information. As we talked about, the schedule has been released for 6A, given that regular season conferences have kind of shuffled out the way they have. All right, so we will start at week 1, and we will go through every week and pick out at least one game. We'll probably talk about more that we want to see, but yeah, should we get into it?
Sure, yeah. So kind of like we touched on with Coon Rapids kind of throwing me off because I didn't know whether they were maroon or not, and that was like preventing me from seeing how the scheduling would work out. But because it did work out like that with week 1, we have all these amazing cross section games. So that did stay consistent. If you look at all the matchups we have here, none of those teams are in the same. Maybe we have a same section game, like I see Park and White Bear and Woodbury Roseville, but they're all cross district games.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you have a Maroon team playing an East team. In the bottom right corner there, you've got North versus Blaine. So you have a South team versus a Metro North team. And it just gives us all these amazing matchups. So,
How about you go over your first game through week 1 while I try to do this, and then we'll start it that way. So we're drafting basically. Again, I'll let you get first pick. Go
I
for it,
get
and then
first pick.
we'll go through just every week. It'll be two games at least, but we'll probably talk about a little bit more than 2 games, I would guess, per week.
Definitely. So, I actually, you know what? Before we get to the draft, can we talk about one quick thing? Because I think a viewer commented on this, and I know you and I were talking about it with week 1.
Yep.
The potential of trading games.
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of like we were talking about the state tournament, this is another kind of complicated thing. So I know there's at least 2 teams in 6A that are one of those repeat matchups that we talked about. Because, just looking at week 1, you have Centennial and Rosemount matching up again. And then right below them, you see there's Prior Lake at Forest Lake, both of which were cross-section matchups from last time. And, whether the state high school league's fighting me or not, I don't know. But, one of those matchups, both those teams might be looking to essentially trade with another team. Like, I know Maple Grove Stillwater's been thrown around as one. I think Andover Wyzetta was another one that was looked at being exchanged week 1. And so just to kind of clue in the viewers on how that would work. So suppose like Prior Lake, Forest Lake want to trade a game with Andover Wyzetta. The way it works in high school football is the ADs basically sign a contract saying that those teams are going to match up. Like, I want to say when I was at my first year at South, we had a 9B game on the fly against Centennial because Rochester Mayo didn't have a 9th grade B game. And our AD had to meet with their AD, sign a contract and everything saying, yep, Centennial will come down on this date to play Lakeville South. And then we were able to have a game. So in order to do a trade like that, all 4 coaches and ADs would have to meet, be in agreement, and then I assume a representative from the state high school league would also have to approve of it. So it is a little bit of a complicated process, and you need unanimous agreement from 4 coaches and 4 athletic directors for that to go through.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, partially. It's a confusing process, but makes sense for the most part. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I know. Like a recent example was I think Maple Grove was trying to trade their week 1 matchup last year. They were trying to trade with Shakopee and Hopkins. They wanted Maple Grove and Shako to play, and then Osseo Hopkins would play. But one of the coaches or ADs said no, and then obviously trade doesn't go through. It stops right there. So, yeah, do you want to get into the draft now? That's kind of pretty much the whole spiel on the trading games and why the schedule isn't necessarily set in stone. It's pretty darn close just because it's so rare a trade gets approved, but it's still a low chance, but it's possible.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. So, so I get to pick one game from week 1.
Yep.
Oh, so
many.
I'm gonna go. I know it's a tough one. I'm gonna go over. So I'll go over my 3 honorable mentions. I was thinking Centennial Rosemount because that's been a great physical matchup. We've seen it a bunch, and maybe Rosemount can finally beat Centennial after 3 years. Prior Lake, Forest Lake is a big rivalry now, or kind of a recent one. Two physical teams. Plus, you get Ethan Beckman lined up across from Howie Johnson all the time. That's a great matchup. Then Shakopee Egan. Maybe Shakopee can get a little revenge because Egan snubbed them out of the 1 seed in Section 6 back in 2022 in Week 8 and gave EP the 1 seed again because they lost in Week 8. So those were honorable mentions. But my choice is Lakeville North at Blaine. And kind of going into why. So I'm not just like, oh, well, North graduated all the players. I kind of look at it from the coaching perspective. Like Coach Vossen is defensive minded, heavy blitzing defense. Lakeville North is very physical, run heavy, and they do it out of like heavy packages. So your 22 personnels, your 13 personnels. Blaine is similar. They're kind of at the opposite end. Instead of heavy defense, you have Coach Law, who's an offensive-minded guy, and he can throw it around. He loves running out of the spread. He always runs the quarterback. So they're both
Sam
run
Shaughnessy
heavy.
was running around the field crazy last year.
Exactly, and they know how to design plays to get their athletes in space like that. So I guess that matchup of two run-heavy teams, but that they just do it in such different styles. And plus, you have a great defensive-minded coach going against one of the best offensive-minded coaches in 6A. I mean, that's just going to be an awesome matchup right there. And they're both very good teams. You know, everyone's like, oh, Blaine's overrated or North's injured. The QRFs were still pretty high for both those teams, and they both made the state quarterfinal last year. They were both top 8 teams in 6A. So I think that'll definitely be a good matchup. What's yours?
I'll take my Forest Lake. I'll take my Forest Lake freebie week 1. Like we talked about, Forest Lake, Prior Lake. It's got two of the best players in state in different classes, like you talked about, with Beckman and Johnson, hopefully being lined up across from each other. I don't know if he's gonna be on the left side, or right side of the line, or how he's gonna be on the left side, or right side.
Is Howie right? So I know Ethan Beck. So Prior Lake, little fun fact about them, they always put their biggest kid left tackle. That's just the way Prior Lake is. That way they can pull him around when they run wham toss out of their wing tee. So I can almost guarantee Beckman will be playing left tackle.
Well, let's get Howie on the right side then and line it up, because that's a matchup everybody wants to see. College coaches, high school coaches, fans, and players. That's going to be a fun one. And then we talked about in the last podcast about how these two out of conference, out of section teams have played each other really well the past 2 years, going back to Forest Lake playing at Prior Lake in what year was that? That was 2023. A very low scoring game, and then last year a little bit of a higher scoring game in the 20s, and down point at the end of it. The lights went out during the game. There's usually some sort of fireworks that goes down in this game. It's the Battle of the Lakes. I'm here for it. I will be excited to watch it happen. It's going to be exciting. I think just another one to just think about, or at least interesting, I guess, is Andover's first game in 5A. That's not just Andover playing Wayzata, which is going to be a good game on paper to kind of get introed into 6A, but just all the teams coming up, like Rogers at Moorhead. That's a 5A game last year. Now it's 6A, so they kind of get introduced to each other coming into 6A, which I find interesting.
Definitely, yeah. And like we said, it's kind of weird that they chose that because Rogers and Moorhead only get those 2 cross-section games. So as you see, one of Andover's is Wayzata, because Wayzata is Section 6, Andover Section 5. And Moorhead and Rogers are different sections. Again, it's a 5-6 matchup. But like you said, if you only get 2 opportunities to see teams outside of your conference, why play a team that you've already seen for years in 5A? Like, get Rogers matched up against maybe like a Lakeville North and then have Moorhead play a Blaine or something like that. But no, I think they're still intriguing matchups.
Distance traveled.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I'm really interested in that Andover Wayzata game because, you know, everyone says like Wayzata, you think heavy RPO because they kind of brought the whole RPO system to 6A back in even 2017 or 2016, I want to say, is when Coach Brown really did it. But fun facts, they're actually run the ball 70% of the time because they usually they have second level D and B gap reads for their RPOs. So as long as you just think about which of your, most of the teams in 6A play 3-4 defenses. So you just think about which backer you're blitzing. And that basically controls the RPO. Like, okay, I'm going to have my backer that's on the side of the H-back. If they're on 11 personnel, I'm just going to have them sit in the hook to curl. Then on the RPO, if they're reading it to that side, like tight end pop pass, I know they love that against Edina, then the quarterback knows, okay, I see my second level B gap defender. He's sitting there. He's going to cover the tight end, give the handoff, and then it's a run play. So you can sort of manipulate their system a little bit if you know how to, but it's a little bit tricky to do on the fly. And they really like to dominate time of possession as well. Whereas, as we know with Andover, they're snapping the ball every 10 to 15 seconds. And like I was talking with the Elk River coaches up at our clinic that we just got back from, it's like, so how do you think Andover's going to do in 6A? Well, they're going to score a lot of points. And they were telling me that they've already had some of the 6A teams call them up and say, hey, what do we do with Andover? How do we defend these guys? And they were kind of joking, like, I don't know why they're calling us on how to defend Andover. It's not like we ever do that good of a job or hold them to just a few points. But yeah, I just think that's going to be a real interesting matchup. Because one, how's Andover's offense going to do against the 6A defense? And then two, how is their defense going to respond to the physicality of 6A? Because, when you're going against, say, like, who was in their section? Like Duluth East's offensive line may not be the best, but now you have to take on Wyzetta, biggest high school in the state, well over 3,000 kids, plenty of big boys to choose from. So it'll really come down to that physicality, and we'll see how that plays out.
You mentioned RPOs. I just want to talk about this for a little bit because I feel like RPO, as people have heard it, they just start to use it in random contexts where it's not really it's fun to say and it makes you look smart, but I think some people overuse it. Like there's a difference between, well, there's types of RPOs. There's a pre-snap and post-snap RPO, which I think the pre-snap RPOs are pretty common now. Like there's a pre-snap RPO would be like you got a receiver running a bubble and you got a run play called, and your quarterback chooses before the snap, he's made up his mind. Is he going to pass it because he's got numbers out on the edge, or is he going to run it because he's got good box numbers? That's one of them. And then there's the post snap, which is like a little bit, especially for 6A, I would say uncommon. Like not a lot of teams run post snap RPOs. Wyzetta is one where they're reading defenders after the snap and they put that on the quarterback. That's just one of the things. I hear announcers talk about, it's like, it's a stretch play and there's like, oh yeah, run pass option, or the quarterback, like he's clearly in the pocket looking and then he like scrambles out and he's like, oh, the run pass option there. It kind of gets on my nerves a little bit, but yes.
Yeah, no, I definitely ran into that because like I said, I do a lot of the scouting analytics for like Scout O for our defense for the varsity games. And who do we play week 1? Wyzetta. So I have to look at how they build RPOs. And funny enough, I actually found an old clinic that Coach Brown put on talking about how they build RPOs. So I was like, okay, I got to study this and learn. And I actually compared it to like ordering something at a restaurant, like ordering a burger. So like most of the time you'll see they come up, they clap and they do a fake snap and then they get a play. And what I realized they're doing is they're looking at how the defense aligns. And then their OC, probably up in the box, is saying, all right, here's how they align. I'm going to order this run play as my entree, and I'm going to order this pass play as my side dish. So you think of it like a burger and tater tots. Instead of burger and tater tots, it's let me get inside zone with an RPO slant on the backside because that's where we want it. And then you can see when they do the handoff, you see the quarterback's eyes for any of those in-breaking routes, your slants, hitches, or ins. They are reading that second-level D-gap defender. We didn't have one all that often last year because they got us in a lot of 3x1s. So most of their RPOs were to the wide side, or if they did, it was a backside hitch. And because we didn't have a second level B gap defender in their 3x1, we actually had our inside backer, our will backer in a 40 technique. So we was watching B gap. They were able to just throw there all day because we didn't have anyone in the flats. And then it's just hitch one-on-one.
The backside hitch in high school football is it's crazy, especially if you got a good X receiver.
Anoka knows all about doing that to Lakeville South. So yeah, but you know, sometimes it's a good wake up call and it tells you, okay, we messed something up and we can improve upon it. But yeah, as far as post snap RPOs, the only teams off the top of my head that I know for a fact do it are Wyzetta, Edina, and Moorhead. I feel like I sort of saw Park doing it. I don't know if they're just like Park Cottage Grove, if they're fake hitting slants off of inside zone.
It's sometimes hard to tell too. Which I get it, but there's sometimes it's clearly something else, and we call it RPO. It's time to stop. let's go to week 2.
Yeah.
All right. So week 2, we got some good games going. Week 2 as well. You know, I don't really know where to go on this, but I'm gonna highlight a little bit. I think Hopkins. Let's go to Hopkins and Eastridge.
Ooh.
Well, we'll talk about Hopkins later. Okay. Uh, this is one of their like bigger games because we talked about them going to the Maroon schedule, so they're mostly going to be playing those Maroon teams.
Mm-hmm.
Eastridge, one of those actual tests. Hopkins, I think playing Edina week 1. That's a rough game. I think Eastridge is definitely a winnable game for them, and I think it's gonna be a good game. I'm predicting. We'll see if I'm right, but Coach Chauncey has got the Royals on the move, and I'm excited to see that. That's kind of like one of their tests, I would say, because Edina, I would say, is out of Hopkins' class. I'll go out on the record. I'm just going to say that. But I think Eastridge is within the realm, especially after last season. With the talent Hopkins has, I like to see it. I'm looking forward to that one.
Definitely. So as a team that had to play I don't remember if they were 3-5 or 2-6 when they were the 6th seed in the 2023 state tournament, but yeah, we at Lakeville South know better than to estimate or underestimate Coach Fritzy over there. He's got a great offensive mind, and whatever Hopkins comes out on in defense, he's going to pick apart. And then for as far as Hopkins' offense goes, I think they'll be able to move the ball because it's Eastridge definitely more offense focused than defense. I guess it depends on which one watches the stream that I did on Hopkins versus Shakopee, because I kind of talked about all these just tendencies that Hopkins gave away with their offense and some things they could improve upon to make it a little bit harder to tell what they're doing all the time. So I guess it depends on who gets there first. If Hopkins isn't going to make any of those adjustments and Eastridge happens to see all those keys, I think they'll be able to take advantage of it and shut them down. If Hopkins is able to say, okay, if our Z is going in motion and our running back is opposite of the motion, obviously we're not giving the jet handoff because there's no running back to lead block. But no, talent-wise, I definitely think they match up pretty well. Hopkins could give them a game if they just clean up a little bit of that stuff offensively.
All right, what do you got?
So I don't want to pick Blaine again, because I was thinking like Blaine at Rogers because it's Rogers' first official 6A game,
right?
And they get a high octane offense right away. And I think Rogers is a bit more of a defensive team. I want to say Coach Franz is a defensive guy, and so I just think that'll be like their first big test. But I'm gonna play the Lakeville South card. I'm gonna say Lakeville South at Shakopee. That's kind of an unspoken rivalry. Every time prior to this past year, every time Shakopee has made or tried to make a playoff run, they always bump into the Cougars, and we always get the better of them every single time. 2021, I think it was the state quarterfinal. We played out in Stillwater, and we got them. Obviously, 2020. I don't know if we matched up in 2022, but 2023, they had to come to our place in the second round, and we got really lucky. They couldn't really get their offense going. We had that blocked punt I think it was in the first quarter after they stopped us at the goal line, and that kind of flung the whole momentum. So it's always going to be a good physical game, and we're two run-heavy teams. Obviously, you got your power T versus your flex bone. So, and neither of us run that many plays. You're going to see a lot of trap and power versus a lot of inside veer and rocket toss the whole game. So it all comes down to just who wants to be more physical and who's going to bring the most sauce. But yeah, I always love the Lakeville South Shakopee matchup. That'll be fun.
All right, week 2. Quick, any other ones? This is I guess Moorhead's introduction to 6A with Woodbury. I expect that one to go one way. And over just against Champlain
for Moorhead. Yeah, I mean, you're
you're
talking about 3 hours for Moorhead just to get to STMA, and then I don't know how far it is from STMA to Woodbury. That's like another hour to 80 minutes. So you're talking about over 4 hours you have to go to play your first 6A game against an actual 6A team that's been 6A. Yeah, even
initial test.
Even if Woodbury I know they had a down year last year. Maybe they'll be a little bit better this year, but yeah, it'll be their first official test. That's definitely one to watch. And as you see, because I think we touched on it earlier, we're starting to get some section play here, like Andover Champlin's another great game. You mentioned, who was the other one? Forest or Lakeville North Farmington. That's another interconference matchup. STMA Minnetonka, EP Maple Grove. We didn't touch on that. I mean, that's a big physical matchup. But
Hey,
I guess we'll.
The White Bear Coon Rapids, don't sleep on it. Okay, Coon Rapids, a new coach, White Bear with a new offense. I
Yeah,
think week 1, tempted to put like these unknowns kind of just as games to watch, just because it's the start of the season and you want to get to known from unknown as quick as possible. But couldn't resist the matchup. But like even that, for, like on paper, White Bear Coon Rapids, you're like, oh, these two teams weren't very good last year. But like, first off, who knows? Again, this year they're competing against each other
yeah.
with kind of a different look. It'll be an interesting game, even though it's one that's kind of lower on the viewing scale.
But it's possible. I mean, I don't think a maroon team has ever beaten a non-maroon team in regular season play or in the playoffs for that matter. But the closest we got was 2023 Week 7. White Bear only beat Roseville 10-7, so we almost had it. So I do, not to throw shade at White Bear, but they have come the closest to losing to a maroon team. So, like you said, maybe Coon Rapids can get it done. New head coach, he brings in that Andover style of offense. They're just absolutely going downfield on White Bear. White Bear gets tired and can't keep up. Maybe something could happen. You never know.
Yeah, most definitely. I'm trying to find week 8. All right. So that was week 2. Let's go to week 3. Producer. All right,
Oh,
here we
yeah.
go. All right, you go ahead.
Definitely. So there's a ton of great matchups in this one. You've got Prior Lake at Rosemount. I think that'll be a good one, but I didn't pick that. Obviously, there's North South, but we know what the Battle of Lakeville is down here. We don't need to draw any more attention to it. It's just bragging rights for who gets to own LBC and Dairy Delight for the next year. So, and then I think the one two that I'm still deciding between. I think I'm probably going to take Moorhead at Minnetonka.
A battle of the
Um,
M's.
yeah, there was another team that I was looking at, but I definitely want one of their later matchups. But yeah, the two M's. So we kind of talked about. I think this is Moorhead's like real actual 6A test because, like you said, week 1 they get to host Rogers. Week 2 they have to go all the way out to Woodbury, and Woodbury might be rebuilding right now, so it might not be the
So
best.
you're saying this is the
Well,
real intro to 6A.
yeah, and just looking at it from a coaching perspective, Mark Esch, great offensive mind. You've got Coach Lambo over there on the defense; he's going to get it done. Then you got Jet Feeney, all these star D1 athletes from Minnetonka. You have Coach Feeney with his RPO system; he's just going to dissect. I mean, you're getting one of the best, if not the best, defensive coordinator in Minnesota against one of the best offensive minds in the state of Minnesota in this matchup in only the third week. I mean, it's going to be absolutely killer.
So one of the things comment wise on the schedule release, just there's Moorhead being a really good team in 5A, going up to 6A. There's questions on they got athletes. Are they going to be able to compete? Are they going to be as good as they were in 5A? I have my thoughts. What are your thoughts?
I definitely think so. So one of the things that's always set Lakeville South apart is our Olympic weightlifting team. I kind of touched on that last week. We're an Olympic lifting focused strength program. And the team we're always competing with for state is Moorhead. And it always, we've won the last few years. They finally beat us in JV this past year. So, congrats to the Spuds. But they do a great job with their lifting. I don't know if you've ever seen Moorhead Spuds Instagram account for their football. I mean, they're talking about dietary stuff. They're talking about what student athletes need to do during the day, how to allot time to homework, how much screen time you get. Like, they are so heavily invested in their student athletes. And like you said, they have great skill position guys. I've heard they've lost some of their linemen, but because they have that Olympic program, you're always going to build those big kids up, and they're going to be physical. They have that explosiveness that a non-Olympic team may not be able to get out of their student athletes. So out of those 3 teams that moved up, I definitely think Moorhead has the best chance to compete in 6A. And that'll be the first big test, like we said. And you get that battle of Kevin Feeney and Coach Lambo going at it. That's going to be an absolute just amazing matchup. I'm really hyped for that one.
I feel like the best games always are at Minnetonka for some reason. Like last year, it was the Edina Minnetonka game that was like, ooh, yeah, got to get there. And then the Maple Grove Minnetonka game at Minnetonka, and Minnetonka's like an hour away. It's like, great,
Yeah.
get the games a little closer to me, so I don't got to be traveling there on a Friday night and go through traffic. Ugh.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, that's a really good pick, and I would echo everything you said with Moorhead. Can they compete? I don't think it's a question. Just I I am pretty sure that they can. I can't wait. It's going to be one of my favorite teams to keep tabs on throughout the season. I'm a big believer in Feeney. I think he's going to take when you got a good quarterback, things kind of just flow from that. It's going to
Hmm.
give you a chance to win every game, and I think that they will have a chance in every
Definitely.
game that they
That,
play. I think you're definitely right in pointing out this is one of the biggest games. If I was drafting first this week, I would definitely pick that game.
I
Most
hope I didn't
definitely.
steal your first
Oh
pick.
no, because you gotta be prepared, of
Hmm.
course. But yes, so that I know you talk about this Lakeville South North, but this is my first time experiencing the Lakeville South North rivalry last year, and boy was it a time to experience it. Um, I drafted the game because I don't know if I'll be there again to cover it, but it was one of my funnest games from my first season of just going to games and recording. So I'm obligated to pick it.
Oh, it's always a blast. I think Randy Shaver was there pregame talking, and like you said, it's always close. The year before that, it all came down to Riley. We were tied up 21-21 with like a minute left. Riley Grossman miraculously fumbled on his own 20 with a minute left. We run 3 plays, they burn their timeouts. We kick a game-winning field goal and get lucky. So, yeah, week 4.
Yep, here we come, week 4. I'm gonna
Oh,
go. Is it my pick? Do I
yeah,
get to go? All right.
absolutely.
Edina Maple Grove. This was a matchup that we saw Maple Grove getting the better of Edina quite mightily. And I think this is, Edina has people graduating, so does Maple Grove, but Edina, it's one of the best quarterback matchups we're going to see of the season. I think Harney recently committed to South Dakota State. Mason West, who knows where he's going to go, if he's going to even play football at the next level, if he chooses hockey. But as a quarterback myself, I love good quarterback play. We might get into another one, week 8, of good quarterback play, just like a matchup of I'm going to this game strictly to see the quarterbacks play. Those are always fun games that I enjoy personally, and that's where I'm going to go for week 4.
That's going to be an awesome one. Yeah, I mean, like you said, both teams are kind of a question mark to me as to where they're going to fall this year. Maple Grove graduated a ton of kids. Coach Spurl himself is kind of stepping out of the shadow of Coach Lombardi. He gets to make this program his own. So, what direction is he going to go in with the team from here on? So a lot of interesting stuff there. And then talking about Edina, I think last time we talked about how Edina kind of had, I guess, a little relatively disappointing season last year, coming off of a state title appearance.
Relative to expectations, yeah, I think it's fair
Yeah.
to say.
And as I sat and actually thought about it, and obviously been watching Edina film because we got to play him week 6, I was like, oh, one of the big underrated parts of that 2023 Edina team that I don't know if anyone really talked about was John Warpinski, the running back. Was it John Warpin? I remember it was Warpinski, something like that.
Okay.
Hockey kid too, but his ability to run the ball on GH counter and then pair that with their second level RPO reads was so deadly.
They're a good RPO
Um,
team. Yeah.
they are, yeah, definitely. And you've got the quarterback to do it. And that just kind of put teams in a bind because it's like, well, if we drop the guy back into coverage to cover Myers Sweeney or Sonny Villiega, then who's going to be in the box to tackle John Warpinski? And so they kind of had that dual threat attack that really made their RPO potent. Whereas I don't think Edina quite got their run game going last year as much as they wanted to. And I think that's kind of what held them back in that postseason. So, and it also doesn't help that you ran into Maple Grove in the 3rd round. But
Right.
if you
Edina
want to
always
win
has
state,
athletes too to use the RPO. Sometimes the RPO is effective when you got people that are on the outside that are going to stretch the defense vertically and horizontally. They had him last year. Sweeney's gone, but
yep.
Strader's going. I know Owen Eggy's going to Edina from Stillwater. Yeah,
Oh,
they're gonna
is
have the
he the one
personnel
that
to do it.
transferred from STMA over to
Yep. He
Stillwater,
went to STMA to Stillwater,
and
and
now he's
now
going
he's going to
Stillwater
Edina.
to Edina?
Yep.
I wonder if he's collecting NIL money doing that.
Well,
Transfer
I can tell you
here.
that dude runs some of the best routes in high school football. So
Mhm.
putting him on a dangerous offense already, it's gonna make it even more. And now they got two basically number one receivers who would be for pretty much any other team in 6A.
Definitely. And I think so. We touched on those post snap RPOs. You have to have the quarterback that can make that read. Because, I mean, you're essentially leaving the fate of your offense in the decision making skills of a 17 or 18-year-old boy. Generally, I'm not going to trust the decision making skills of a teenage boy. So if you want your offense to rely on that at
Yeah,
South,
that's
we're
why you
like,
guys
yeah,
just run the piss out of the ball.
exactly. We're like, we don't want to mess with that. But when you have the quarterback to do it, like a Mason West or a Jet Feeney, then you might again use the strengths that you have. You can't control the players that come into your school. Who you have is who you have to work with. But when you see the talents, if they're able to do that, you set up your system to utilize their talents the best. And I think they're absolutely crushing that with Mason West at Edina.
All right, your pick. Go for it.
Ooh, so I'm going to have to go with Andover at Centennial. So we kind of talked about Moorhead's introduction to 6A. Andover has some good matchups before this, but you have probably the most polar opposite philosophy-wise teams in
Mm-hmm.
6A going head-to-head.
Kind of like the Elk River. It's like the 6A version, kind of, in a way.
True, yeah. I mean, I guess like the one difference is Elk River's always able to rip off some explosive plays against Andover because they weren't quite all that good at defending the power T.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, so they never have a chance to grind the play clock down, which is a tactic Elk River used against, was it Alexandria in the state final? Chase Thompson is only good if he's on the field. If he's sitting on the bench for 9 minutes every quarter, well, he's not doing a whole lot, is he?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and again, that's what Centennial does. We played them in the 2023 semifinal, and they were a better team than us. I always try and gauge if I say a team is better or worse than the other. What I do is, and some of my colleagues do this, say defenses. You take Centennial's defense and their opponent's defense, and you just start putting kids. Okay, who's going to be the D end? Who would I take at the nose guard from the two teams? And whichever you take the most players from generally is the better team. And just looking at Centennial, they are so physical and dominant. Even when we played a 9B game against them like years ago, I mean, again, 9B team, their kids are just going like pop every single time, and we're still like running the ball all over them, but they just come up and they feel so fast. So whatever the coaches Diggins are doing over there, they're doing an amazing job with the physicality. But again, you have a flex bone triple option team, a lot of inside veer, buck sweep, midline belly. And then you're going against Andover, a high octane team who wants to absolutely just wear you down defensively, snap the ball every 10 seconds, and so just kind of seeing how those two opposite philosophies collide. Who's going to end up winning? Is Centennial going to grind down Andover's offense or defense so that they can never stop them and their offense isn't on the field? Or is Andover going to jump out to an early lead and then Centennial has to play catch-up ball, which they're not built to do? But then again, if their defense can't stop the run, I mean, there's just so many ways that game could go. And like we said, it's Andover's real kind of wake-up test for the physicality that comes with 6A football.
Yeah, and I think Centennial, at least I'm expecting them to be better than they were last year. They had the state title team. A lot of people graduated. They come back. That's kind of like the year kind of in sway where they're getting experience, they're getting their feet wet, so to speak, at a varsity level. And then this is the year to kind of ramp up with the quarterback in year 2 of playing in the offense and just having the OC, give them plays, stuff like that. Just it does matter.
Mm-hmm.
So I think with that prediction, I think that is a really good pick for week 4.
Definitely, yeah. And Coach DeVellis also gets it done on offense. I talked about the Diggins over there, Coach Littlefield running Centennial's offense. It's going to be an absolute just amazing game, and I have no idea how it's going to play out. And it could potentially decide who wins Section 5. So I guess we'll see that coming later down the line as we get further on in the weeks.
All right, sorry about that. Let's move on to week 5 matchups. I think, is it your pick or my pick? Which one?
I go first on odds, I believe.
All right, go for it. I
Um,
think mine's safe.
I I don't want to pick repeat teams. I think the one that you want to pick might have been my honorable mention, so I won't mention it. Uh,
Interesting.
I we'll see if I'm right on that, but I got a pretty good knack for predicting things. Um, I've already, you know what? I'm gonna say Maple Grove at Moorhead. So
That's a
the
good one.
main reason I want this one is, we've talked about Maple Grove, we've talked about Moorhead. But the reason I really wanted to see this one is because so far the only teams that have had to go up to Moorhead were, I think it. Let me double check my schedule on this point. It was Rogers, who's used to it, and then they have 2 games on the road. They're at Minnetonka and at Woodbury. So this is the first time, like, an actual big. Well, I guess aside from why is that a week 4, but you're talking about the defending state champion of 6A in Maple Grove having to drive 3.5 hours up 94 onto the
Mm-hmm.
border of North Dakota to go play a Moorhead team that just wants to absolutely tear them up and is hungry. I think that's going to be a classic matchup. How is Maple Grove going to handle that long travel? Because they never traveled that far. I don't know if they played Brainerd in the tournament the last cycle. I don't think, or 2 cycles ago. I don't think they did. They never matched up with Rochester Mayo in the previous cycles. So they never had to go down there. They're just not a team that's traveled a whole lot. So now you got to go across the state. How are your kids going to respond to that? How obviously Moorhead's going to be fresh and they're a very good team. So how is that all going to play out? I don't know, but I guess we'll find out, and I'm really excited to find out.
All right. I like that pick. If I was picking, like game of the week, think that would probably be it. The honorable mention Minnetonka Eden Prairie. Eden
Mm-hmm.
Prairie was one of the only teams to get Minnetonka last year, and I was like on their down year. Who knows what they'll be this year, but just an interesting game nonetheless. But that is not my pick. I will be picking Rosemount and Farmington.
Oh,
Now, I think this
interesting.
one more that like this would be a game that I would choose to go to because I didn't get to any of these 2 games or any of these 2 teams games last year. And they're kind of like down, away from me. So it is a trip to get out. That's why I didn't. But killing 2 birds with one stone, this would be a game. And I know Rosemount underperformed last year, but I think they were in a lot of close games and their record wasn't as good as how they were. Um,
Mm-hmm.
hey, Farmington with the new unis last year,
Those are sick,
I
by the way.
got some good uniforms. They got stuff cooking. I think just like matchup wise, this would be one I would want to go see just because I don't know a whole heck of a lot about these 2 programs, just being so far away from them. I think it'd be a fun, cool experience to get down and watch this game.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, they're obviously being in Section 3 and being in the Metro South. We know a whole lot about Farmington and Rosemount in the city of Lakeville. Farmington is completely redoing their offense this year. They're going from their pistol spread to a gun single wing. So it's hard to imagine, but it's unbalanced. You take a tackle from the
Orbit.
left over to the right, tight end
Okay.
backside, running back offset, quarterback also offset from the center, so he could snap it either left or right to either of them. Then you have a sniffer H back between the tackle and guard, another Z H back over here, and then you have an X receiver out on the far side. So
And I got to see this now.
yeah, who knows? Like, we've never seen something like that in Minnesota, as far as I know. So
A
yeah,
lot of
that's
motions.
yeah, tons of motions between those 2 sniffer backs. The running back
Yep.
could go in motion. They could even send their quarterback in motion since
Mm.
he's not guaranteed to get the snap every
I've
play.
seen those where they split the center up. It's always an interesting concept. And the tough thing about it is some high school programs struggle to find a center that can snap the ball. And I know that's
Mhm.
weird to think of, and it's probably getting better, but like the transition from under center to gun, that's why a decent amount of teams just exclusively do one. Like if you're a
Mhm.
shotgun team, if you're a pistol team, you're not going to do that. If you're under center team, you're not going to mess around with shotgun snaps very often, just because it is a lot different for the center. But
Absolutely.
yeah, interest. That really, man, you're making me want to go to that game.
It is. And Rosemount, so we always have an inside joke with Rosemount. Whatever teams they lose to in the previous season, that's what offense they adopt the next season. So like 2021 was the first time that Lakeville South's beaten Rosemount in who knows how many years, because they always get the better of us, always. We finally beat them. All of a sudden in 2022, they're running stuff out of a tee, and I'm like, oh, interesting. And then in 2023, they lost to all three of the heavy under-center flexbone teams in 6A, Shakopee, Egan, and Centennial. So then 2024 rolls around. Now all of a sudden they're back to running their old school option stuff with the double slot backs. They're doing toss, they're doing veer. They love midline. Rosemount's bread and butter is always the midline. But I think something they ran into last year, like you said, they kind of struggled. They had such a giant playbook. They were doing option out of I formations, both 21 and 22 personnel. They had their T stuff, which was 32 personnel. They did pistol spread stuff, which is completely like all those three things are just so different from each other. And then they had the flexbone stuff. So they just had an enormous playbook, tons of different personnel packages, and they had a ton of penalties. At least when we played them, they had a bunch of penalties for like too many men on the field, or they had to use a timeout because they don't have enough guys out there for the right personnel group. But what I've heard talking to them, they're really kind of leaning out their playbook. So Rosemount's going to be dangerous, and they're going to be playing a lot of young kids. Their 9th grade team this past season, I don't think they lost a single game. They didn't give up a single point until week 6 of the season. Even though it's 9th graders, to do that in 6A is pretty darn impressive. And that was with a lot
for 2029.
Yeah, no. Rosemount will be young this year. We'll see how it plays out. But 25 and 26 and 27 seasons, Rosemount's going to be very dangerous to say the least.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely, I like that pick.
All right. Well, let's move on to week 6. We see Hopkins again racking them up. Week 6, where is it? There it is. There's pick.
Another win for Hopkins, potentially.
Just, man, on a roll. I was just looking at this one. And I was like, oh, I screwed up the graphic because Coon Rapids has a orange background.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. It's a lot of stuff to juggle when you're doing these graphics. There's bound to have one thing slip when you got this many things going on. But week 6, my pick. Intriguing Anoka Champlin matchup. Again, I like that matchup for just like those are two teams that I didn't get to watch in person. I watched them online, but and I think that's I'm not from Anoka or Champlin, but those two teams have a decent rivalry, or they play each other a decent amount. I think that would be an interesting game to go watch, and I think that's where I'm gonna stay.
That's going to be an awesome matchup. That was actually the number 1 that I had picked for this week too. Again, Anoka, Bo Wasrick, great offensive mind. Champlin Park, Nick Keenan, great defensive mind, very physical. They're in the same school district. It's a rivalry up there. And I think it's the one time you'll see Champlin Park get out of their base 4-3 defense, because they play a 3-3 nickel against Anoka most of the time. Which I think is always an interesting way to see. Champlin's one of the few teams that still runs a 4-3 in 6. I want to say it's Champlin, Centennial, and Edina are the last that do a 4-3, and then Eastview, Roseville are 4-4s. Everybody else is a 3-4. So it's always cool to see those different styles of defense. And like you said, they're two very different identities. Anoka likes to have a balanced attack with Zach Welch last year, but they've had Peyton Podani. They can air it out. They're going to spread it out. Champlin Park is a very physical run-heavy team. They'll line up in their wing twins. They'll do their sweep. They'll do their counter. The quarterback loves to run. There's just so many different ways Champlin Park can beat you, and you have to try and defend all of those while also trying to out-physical them. And we know that from playing them the last 2 years. Thankfully, we got the better end of it, but definitely a very physical team. Can't underestimate the Rebels, but I love that pick. So now I am going to pick... I'm going to take Eastview at Hopkins. Want to get some variety in here. So for those that don't know, I think you mentioned Hopkins finally won their first game in, I want to say 4 years this past season. From 2020 to 2024, they did not win a single game from week 3 to week 3 of those years. And who was the team that they managed to beat? Eastview up at Hopkins. So I think we might have a little rivalry brewing here. You know, Eastview wants to come back. They're like, wow, we gave Hopkins their first win in 4 years. We have to come up and get revenge for that. And then Hopkins, obviously,
I like it.
it's personal, yeah. And like we said, Eastview runs a 4-4 defense. How are you going to run a 4-4 defense into Hopkins' 10 personnel or 11 personnel spread offense? It's not actually exactly an easy thing to do. So the teams are going to have to adapt to each other from how they normally play. And that's why I think that matchup is so intriguing.
You know, the thing that I like about high school football is because they're not seasoned with, like, I don't know how to say this, emotions, or they don't really have like a filter, right? So if you were to talk about this in like the NFL or college context, they'd be like, I don't remember however many years ago, it's just another game. But like, I feel like high school players and programs, like, they talk about this stuff, they keep grudges with that. So like, you don't think Eastview knows that? You don't think they know that going into the game? That's definitely something that it, if their coach isn't using it as fuel during the week, it's definitely something that the players are talking about in the group chat going up to that week.
Mm-hmm.
And I can guarantee you on the opposite end, Hopkins is like, can't lose to these guys. You know, this is a game we have to win. So kind of like that. Hey, I'm not mad at it. And another one for him.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Another honorable pick was Shakopee at Prior Lake, but I mean, we know all about that matchup. Shakopee's going to hit him with midline. Prior Lake's going to be overly aggressive. Prior Lake will get some good runs, maybe get one of their wheel routes off. Those two teams know each other and what they do. It's going to be a great physical matchup, but, you know, seen it plenty of times. We know how it's going to go. A lot of running, yep.
All right, let me try to find week 7.
All good, yeah. I mean, if Shakopee or Prior Lake can't stop the inside veer, why run a different play, eh, Shako?
Right. All right, there it is. Sorry about that. Week 7, it is an odd number. That means it is your turn, sir.
Oh, so before I make my pick, are you planning on playing the Ranger card here?
You know, I could very well. But if you play it, I can just go off of you and talk about it.
Okay. I don't know how Mounds View is going to be. So
you can go for it. Take it. See if I get it.
All right, I'll go. So I did have another matchup because I had 2 matchups this week that I think could be section deciding games week 7. One of which was Forest Lake at Mounds View. You know, we talked earlier on the show about how when it came down to who got the 1 and 2 seed in Section 4 last cycle, Mounds View beat Forest Lake week 3. Come to the end of the season, the coaches saw that. Mounds View wins the tiebreaker. Mounds View gets the 1 seed. So it's not like they had an easy matchup in round 2. You get Prior Lake and then you get Shakopee after that. But I mean, that doomed who did you play? Blaine, right? In the second round, Forest Lake had to match up with Blaine. So that's not, I mean, okay. Prior Lakes or Shakopee aren't easy matchups either. Blaine's not an easy matchup, but yeah, that's how like much your seeding could change. And if you did get by Blaine, who's after that? Well, Minnetonka and the Skippers. So that's why seeding is just so important. And especially this next season, when you consider that 3 of the sections only have 1 maroon team and they're going to be an 8 seed. So if you're a 1 seed, you get to host that 8 seed. Whereas if you're a 2 seed in some of those sections, you could see like a Farmington or an STMA or YZ as a 7th seed. Not exactly a 7th seed I'd like to play in the first round as a 2 seed. So definitely tough matchups. But yeah, and then just going into how the programs are, Mounds View's always been like a more defense-heavy team, but they really brought their offense to life last year. I noticed they tried to come out passing against Farmington week 1. A lot of 10 personnel didn't quite go that well. Then they really committed to the run, and kind of like Blaine, they're one of those teams that will run their quarterback. It just adds another layer to that spread offense, and they do it really well. They run a ton of counter tray. They love running GH counter. They'll do quarterback GH counter like Minnetonka does. They'll get jet motions to throw you off, and Hopkins, if you want to know which side to put the running back on, if you're going to go sidecar spread, highly recommend watching Mounds View film. And And then obviously you have Coach B Scout that's been rebuilding Forest Lake, and we've kind of talked about what's that next step Forest Lake needs to take to kind of establish themselves as a contender. Well, beating Mounds View and winning the section, earning a 1 seed. That to me is the next step, and this is the matchup that could potentially do it. I know Howie Johnson would love to beat the Mustangs for his senior year, as would all the Rangers. So that's definitely my pick. What are you're a Forest Lake guy. What are your thoughts on that matchup?
Well, I think if Forest Lake, I think it's interesting because if Forest Lake is going to get over kind of that hump, like I've talked about, like I think that they should do. I don't know if they're going to. This is a game that they have to win, especially just like even for confidence level. Not forget record, forget anything, but I think Forest Lake needs to be like validated that they can compete with upper echelon. Like it's been just they've gotten stonewalled out of competing with these top teams in the playoffs. And like we saw it, even though they were really good last year, they got ran out of the stadium against Mounds View.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the year, like I'm talking about, like Forest Lake is the best they're going to be from like 2 years from now and 2 years back. Like this is kind of like we talk about windows. This is Forest Lake's window where they have a chance, right? So I think when we look at this late in the season, and I know Mounds View is decently unknown with any of these teams where the quarterback's graduating. It's kind of a flip of a coin of we don't know who's coming in necessarily. We sometimes have an idea, but also, there's teams that can go through two quarterbacks. Like I think Hopkins had two quarterbacks. They started with one. Trey took over towards the end of the season or middle of the season, whatever. And so that's the hard thing to speculate because Mounds View does have talent. We know that they've historically been good, especially against this Force like matchup. Yeah, this is going to be a good one. This is going to be a good one. Interesting. Is it at Mounds View?
It
Yeah.
is, yeah.
Do you know? Usually it flips, doesn't it?
So when
Or
it's the
was
second year of a cycle, you're correct. It flips. When we change cycles,
so
sometimes it'll flip,
okay,
sometimes it won't.
because I thought Forest Lake was at Mounds View last year, and
They were, yeah.
okay,
And
all
like
right,
kind of going back for your pick week
gotcha.
3, Lakeville North was at Lakeville South last year, and we get them at home again this year. So
I guess I didn't see that. I
so,
wasn't
yeah.
paying attention enough. Interesting. Yes.
Some games change, some stay the same. Like Egan and Farmington for us, we hosted Farmington. We're at Egan last year. This year we're flipping that. So some of our games flip. Meanwhile, we're still at Rosemount and we still host Lakeville North. So some change, some don't.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah, I think there's like a few like things I kind of want to highlight the teams that are kind of like a white bear during week 7. Like we know what they're going to be at that point. We kind of have seen their offense, but you would think one of these maroon teams is going to outperform expectations from what people are setting on them. And, like my pick would be Hopkins, but, there could be a second one, and it's now figuring out whether – and White Bear, I get they're not maroon, but they're one of those teams that were below average last year that, again, it's kind of like, what are we going to get? What are we going to get? And I think that's like an Osseo too. So I'm not really going to pick a game this week, but it's kind of just I'm more interested late in the season, whether it's a new head coach or new offensive scheme, defensive scheme, where these teams are going to be. I think like an Osseo Andover matchup, if Osseo can turn it around in 1 year, like you can look at that one and be like, that one's going to be interesting, especially because I don't know what Osseo's offense is going to be rolling out. So who knows, right? At this point of the season, I think the best one is this week. I think it is Forest Lake Mounds View. That would be in Minnetonka Edina too. That's also a really good one. That
definitely,
it produced fireworks last year. I can only imagine it's going to produce more fireworks this year. Again, that's another one where Edina has to go to Minnetonka once again. because they were
Yeah.
last year. So
Repeat, yeah.
mhm.
The only other matchup I had noted this week, because we're kind of talking about honorable mentions, Centennial at Blaine, because I mentioned there were two games that could decide a section. Centennial Blaine is a huge border battle rivalry. And again, you've got two teams that love running the football, but they do it in the most opposite way possible. Centennial out of their triple option flex bone, Blaine doing quarterback runs out of the spread, and both teams love running their quarterbacks. When you think back to 2023, you had Sam Shaughnessy versus Dalen Cummings. I mean, crazy matchup. But yeah, I mean, that to me is a huge one. It's at Blaine, now the third biggest high school in the state of Minnesota. If Centennial wants to win Section 5, that's the chance to do it. If Blaine wants to win Section 5, prove it. Beat Coach Diggins and the Cougars on your home field week 7. That's going to be a big matchup.
Yeah, that's when the whole section, like, alignment actually, like, does start mattering towards the end of the season. When you talk about there's only 4 1 seeds that are going to come out, and it's within those sections. So
Yep.
I think that's also a good point that you brought up.
Yep, because whoever wins that game, then week 1 of the playoffs, you likely have Roseville, Coon Rapids, or Eastview waiting for you. Whereas if you're a 2 seed, maybe you have Wyzetta or Farmington or Egan waiting for you. You never know. So
Right. All right, let's go to week 8, if I can find it once again. There we go. All right. Now, week 8, I know we've already talked about these two teams, but like I said, I'm a sucker for good quarterback play, and boy, do we have it. I guess, like, kind of all over, but mine is Jed Feeney versus Mason West in that game.
ooh.
I mean, number 1 quarterback of 2025 and number 1, or is it, no, 26 would be graduating, and then
Yep, Mason
27.
West is 26.
But no, number 1 quarterback is dueling it out. How can you not like that? Man, that's an easy pick for me. And I get there's good games on here, but just and also the stakes of Moorhead coming in. I think let's pull up a comment, because Harp Dog 07 had a interesting like thought on it of, like, you don't know how these two clubs are going to fare through the first 7 weeks, but like going into it, you would predict it as a marquee matchup. Now, who knows what it's going to be like expectation wise, but like Moorhead isn't going to be introed into, like, there's going to be a lot of film to look at Moorhead and kind of get acclimated. And these are two, we talk about opposites. These are kind of two similar offenses going at it.
Two
That are
post
kind
snap
of
RPO offenses.
exactly.
Yep.
So they're kind of used to going against it as a defense. So like you usually wouldn't think this as a defensive game, but I think this is going to be, it could come back to hit me in the face, but like these two defenses are used to it. Usually you see those high scoring games because a defense is used to playing against this type of team. And this one, the defenses are going to be ready to play. It's just a matter of what execution is going to be like. It could be high scoring. I hope it is, but it could also be some sort of a rock fight where we're expecting this high scoring game, and then it's really, you look down at the scoreboard and you're like, oh, it's 15-20 at the end of like the fourth quarter. And it's like, well, was it expected? Maybe, but also an interesting matchup nonetheless.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, even from like just because I think the comment mentioned film you're going to have on those teams. First, their offenses aren't all that different. Edina's more of a sidecar RPO. They run a lot of GH counter, inside zone. Then they do their in-breaking routes off of that. Moorhead's not all that different. They just do it out of pistol, and then they also love GH counter. They'll go pistol with H back, GH counter to the backside, and then they also sweep is their biggest play, where both guards, kind of like old Centennial Buck sweep, will both pull around. I know Champlin loves to do sweep as well, and they RPO off of that as one of their plays. So again, very similar teams. They love those second level D gap in breaking RPO routes, and like you said, I think it comes down to the defenses, because Moorhead's a base 3-4, and both these teams love to come out in 10, 11, and then Moorhead more so 20 personnel, Edina in 12 personnel if they want to go heavy like they did against Eden Prairie a few years ago. But how do the defenses respond? Like Edina, for example, are you going to stick with your base 4-3 defense against Jet Feeney with 4 receivers out there and 10 personnel? does that create mismatches? And again, you've got smart coaches. You got Coach Potts and Coach Feeney, two great offensive minds. Coach Feeney's probably going to see, hey, they're matching up outside linebackers in the hook to curl against our slot receivers. We're going to take that mismatch. And then same thing with Moorhead, 3-4 defense. Now you have Mason West. Do you go to a nickel package and go to a 3-3? Do you try this, what St. Thomas has done recently with the 2-4 like NFL nickel package? What do? Or do you just stay in your base 3-4, roll safeties down, and then just hope you get your outside backer is able to make that matchup with either a slot receiver, maybe in the backside, helping the corner out. So there's a whole lot of tactics that are going to go into it. And I think it more so, like you said, comes down to the defense instead of the offense.
Indeed. Where will you go?
Oh, so my actual pick, I mean, I don't see how I can't pick this one. It's got to be Minnetonka at Maple Grove. I mean, they've matched up, 3 times recently? There it is. Sam Tressler, Tonka, Maple Grove, about to be a movie. I mean, they've matched up, 3 times in the last 2 seasons? They met week 8 the last 2 seasons. Maple Grove won both of those, had to come back, I think, and they didn't have Chuck Langama for either of the regular season matchups. And then obviously we saw the state title. Maple Grove jumps out to that lead, 28-7. Minnetonka storms back because Minnetonka comeback, underrated. You can never count the skippers out. And then Maple Grove has to try and pull it out at the end to hold them off to win. But now maybe the tables have finally turned. Minnetonka now has that playoff experience and that deep running. You've got Coach Lombardi, who obviously coached at Maple Grove, so there's that angle to it. Maple Grove graduated a lot of kids, and kind of like we touched on earlier with one of the Maple Grove matchups, now you have Coach Spurl taking over, and how is he going to shape that program? How is this going to be Coach Spurl's Maple Grove as opposed to Coach Lombardi's Maple Grove? That's probably the best stage to find out right there. Week 8, Minnetonka at Maple Grove. And if Minnetonka wants to come out and say, hey, you may have wanted to come over here to the West and play all these teams. Well, now put your money where your mouth is. We're going to come out onto your home turf and try and beat you. And Minnetonka might be the team to beat this year. Like, I don't know if we mentioned Caleb Francois yet at running back. We talked about it a little bit on the last podcast. Their O-line is going to be physical. They always have good running backs and receivers. They're going to have a quarterback that can get the ball downfield. So now you got to worry about, and Francois can still throw the ball. Now you're going to have to worry about a running back potentially taking a play on GH counter and then passing it off of that. The quarterback can run or pass. It's going to be tough to game plan against Minnetonka this year.
I think Minnetonka is going to be more of a, I guess, again, this is speculation because I only know so much about the program, especially after like things shake out with graduation and stuff like that, new people coming in. But like last year, they were a good defensive team, like a really good defensive team and a good offensive team. But I think now they're going to be more like really offense driven, less defense driven than anything. The offense is going to be the engine to that team.
Oh, yeah, that offense is going to score. But like we said, they got Coach Lombardi, arguably the greatest DC in 6A.
They got a lot of people leaving, though.
True. Even with, look what he's done with Maple Grove. When you have kids leave, he can get the next group ready and prepared. And Minnetonka has a phenomenal youth football program. They always dominate throughout youth football. So,
and if any school's going to have talent to replace, it is one of those upper echelon schools that has a lot of enrollment.
Definitely, yeah. So, no, like you said, there's definitely some moving pieces that Minnetonka could get snagged on. It'll be interesting to see how they navigate that. But if they do, this might finally be their year to prove it. They're going to beat Maple Grove week 8, and then maybe they make another deep playoff run. All depends on how everything plays out.
Week 8, yes. One of the other ones, just like I think in the comments, it talks about border battles. Like when cities butt up to each other, it has the potential to be, usually even if teams are not good or like not competitive that year, those games seem to always make it close or be memorable in some way. And I get a lot of the times it don't, but like that Eastridge Woodbury game, that's one of those, like when those teams are good, like, that is up there in stuff. I don't know, Woodbury, and they were kind of underwhelming last year, both of them. I expect them to be better this year, and I think hopefully fingers crossed that is a good game, competitive game, with two good teams this year. It's always when you split the Woodbury crew up and you fight it out.
Definitely, yeah. We got a lot of big rivalry matchups, and just going on the border battle. We talked about obviously North South week 3. Last week 7, we talked about Centennial and Blaine. That's a border battle. Another underrated one, Egan Rosemount. That's a big rivalry. Both District 196 schools going at it. Obviously, you got like Champlin, Anoka, all those Anoka Hennepin schools up there. There's just so many rivalries. Yeah, anytime you get that border battle, it's like we said with when we talked about South North, you throw the playbooks out the window. It all comes down. You roll up your sleeves. All right, who's going to throw the most punches? Who can take the most punches? That's pretty much what it comes down to.
What are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts?
Hopkins 8-0 incoming. Let's see. Well, Hopkins is at home
Edina
versus...
week 1.
They have Edina week 1, Eastridge week 2, and then Woodbury week 3. If Hopkins is going, like I said, if Hopkins wants to go 8-0, highly recommend watching my live stream that's on my channel. My first one going over the Shakopee versus Hopkins film. Clean up a few things, but Hopkins is definitely trending in the right direction. You will not go 0-8 this season, is my prediction. But Coach C is doing a great job over there. They're rebuilding, and they won 3 games last year, so that's more than they've won the last 4 seasons combined. So
I think they call it Hop versus the World over there, something like that. That's like their slogan. So, yeah, I'm expecting them to make noise. Even with the Maroon in-season conference, I like them as a team. Young, athletic. Who knows what you're going to get from them? I think it was round 1 last season. They played Lakeville North, and they come out and score right away, and I'm like, oh, here we go. The rest of the game didn't turn out well, but
yeah. Once Coach Boston gets going, he starts bringing pressure. Then, as he always says, his favorite coverage is the blitz. So once he gets that dialed up, then a little bit tough to go from there.
But it's even that little like hint of like success for a team that struggled so mightily. I know you can make fun of it and say, oh, they scored 7 and then got slaughtered, but at the end of the day, those I think that experience, just for them to play a team of that echelon and getting that experience under their belt, having a decent amount of winning in a season for a team that hasn't won a lot. Usually year 2, once you start winning, is kind of, they got introduced to winning. Now they're starting to learn how to win. And now this is kind of when they got their guys. Yeah. I'm not sure about 8 now.
Last year. Now it's time to go eat this year. But if you do, I love the confidence. Make sure it doesn't turn into arrogance. Obviously, you want to be confident but not arrogant. And if you do think you can compete in 6A, make sure to tell your AD and your coach that you don't want to appeal to play a 5A schedule. Because I think we talked about that earlier. That was something that Hopkins had proposed this past Monday. And obviously the State High School League shot it down, but go out there.
Well, to be fair, if they did go down, I feel like if they did go down, this is just me just thinking about it, but they would be a decent amount better than they would be in 6A, from my opinion. If depending on schedules and stuff like that, that would be the only thing to get in the way of that. And I'm not saying they could compete and go win an Elk River game or like that. That's not what I'm saying, but I think they would do a decent amount better in against some of those 5A teams if they did get scheduled, just because we talked about. Yeah, they got the mowers, they got middle schoolers balling last year. They got people to come up and play. I'm kind of glad that they didn't get moved down, because I think this is going to be a good year for them, just to see where they're at.
Definitely, yeah. No, I'm excited for a lot of those matchups. They got a lot of competitive games weeks 4 through 7, and if they want to take down the Giant, you have Eastridge, Woodbury, STMA, and Edina to challenge you for that. So go out there and get it done. But no, you're right. I definitely think they'd be solid at 5A. If you put Hopkins against who are the teams in Section 5 down there? It's Minneapolis Southwest, St. Louis Park, Minneapolis Washburn, even a Two Rivers or Apple Valley. I think Hopkins would easily be able to. Well, I don't know about easily win, but I think they'd
A
be very competitive games and find success
state
there.
tournament appearance.
State, that's right. Yeah, them or Bloomington Jefferson or St. Louis Park coming out of that section. Then you have Elk River waiting for you in the first round of the states. So
That won't be fun.
no,
But we'll never know.
true.
Yeah, that wraps up what we have on our agenda. Do you have anything burning? Any information that the public needs to know?
Oh, if I was gonna make a way too early prediction,
Let's hear it.
I might almost pencil in Chanhassen as the 5A state champion. They
Whoa.
have one of the best classes. We were talking about like Rosemount's freshman team last year. When I played Chanhassen's freshman team when I was at Jefferson 2022, like the most stacked roster of high school kids I've ever seen. I want to say it's their left tackle. I because one of their dads was posting film all year on YouTube, so like we scouted them, and even then we still lost 47-0 or something like that. They were just so
See,
good.
I told you, scouting can only do so much.
It really can. Like we'd be like, hey, they're running the screen to whatever. It's the younger Bush brother. I want to say his older brother was Daxton, the younger one's Cade Bush, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we knew when they line up 3-by-1, and normally he's a tight end, he's split out as a wide receiver. They're throwing a screen to him. They threw a screen to him. The kid's just so athletic, he takes it for 80 yards, even though we knew exactly what he was doing. So, like you said, scouting only does so much, and I think he just committed to Arkansas, didn't he?
I know he's been getting offers from everywhere. So.
I want to say I saw a post on his Insta about Arkansas, and then their I think it's the left tackle is going to Iowa. He also played nose guard a little bit. And
Iowa. If you're going to play tackle at Iowa, you got something cooking.
Absolute mammoth of a kid, and he's fast off the ball. I remember they had him playing nose guard. He can blow up a center. He can slant into the guard, and he's just so fast off the ball for that size. I mean, it was almost like Greg Johnson-esque from Prior Lake a few years ago. Just absolutely fantastic class. And obviously, Coach Nelson's had success. They won state 2 years ago over St. Thomas in 2023. So as long as Mankato West doesn't give them too much trouble in their section, then I think Chanhassen has a very good shot. Obviously, Elk River will have something to say about that. Alexandria, they're both losing a decent amount of seniors. St. Thomas is always going to be good and in the mix. I think Owatonna might have lost some kids, so it'll be interesting. We'll see.
He did commit to Arkansas. Yep.
Do you know does it say wide receiver or DB? Does it specify a position? I think he was an outside back or D end.
It doesn't say on the post. I think all graphics should be mandatory to put the position in, but the graphics are out of my say. What my pushback would be why? I mean, I can't recall Chanhassen's record, but I remember them being one of the disappointments of we thought, or the general public consensus was they were going to be better, but they weren't.
They did also have a really good team the last year. Obviously, they lost some in-season matchups. I want to say it was. Let me just pull it up really fast. I know they lost to Elk River week 1, but then again, that Elk River team was stacked.
You can't fault them for that.
No, the Mankato East one is really surprising.
I mean, I guess like 8-4, but I guess coming off the year,
yeah,
that's definitely where. But sometimes you just run into a buzzsaw and you lose to Elk River by 2 points. And exactly. All right, you heard it here first. You might as well just give them the ring.
Right? We're not going to go that far. There's a lot of things that play out. But, I mean, like you said, and we talked about 5A playoffs earlier, how all those teams you play in the regular season in your section, you then play again to make it to state. The Chaska, they turned around and beat. Mankato West, they turned around and beat in the section final to get into state. Then they walloped St. Thomas Academy, hold Elk River to just 21 points in the state semi up at US Bank. Coach Hamilton was telling me about some of the stuff. I know they were trying to mess with Elk River's cadence. I don't know if that's a penalty or not, but I mean, Chanhassen will do whatever it takes to win, and I think that just kind of shows that if they think they can do it, they'll do it. But
I guess me talking about it. I remember last year, I was trying to cover most of what I could. Mm-hmm. I'm totally wrong on them having a dip, but I remember doing a podcast at the start of the year. It was week 3. It's after week 2, something like that. And the consensus around everybody was oh, Chanhassen, yikes. just because, I mean,
Started
oh,
0-2. Yeah.
exactly. So I think that's where that thought came into, like, why didn't they do? But when you look at it, they rebounded very well. And the only
Yeah.
thing that took them out was the champ, right?
Yeah.
So,
And I mean, if you
um,
look at those two week one matchups, they're both to top four teams in 5A last year. Obviously, Elk River was the state champ that they played in the semis, and Owatonna lost to Alexandria in the semis. So
so
it's,
that's why record doesn't tell the story.
yeah.
That's, and I know the record's easy to get to, but like if it was flipped and a team just smoked two bad teams, and you're like, oh, watch out for this team. It's like they didn't play anybody. You just watch, and then they tank the rest of the season. That's like the opposite
Hmm.
case of what happened at Chanhassen. So, what's their quarterback situation? They got a returner, or is it going to be
Um,
fresh
I
meat?
I I don't know. When we played them in 2022, they had three different kids who were playing quarterback, and they all were able
Mm.
to air it out. They even had like this kid that was I'm only like 5'5", and this kid was shorter than me, and he's just like dropping deep dimes. I'm like, dude, what do you do against
Nathan
this?
Nathan Ramler was a junior last year, so he'll
He
have
must
his
have been
senior
good.
year.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
and I guess I should have expected that because they had such a good that class is so good. They're probably like what we're going to see from Rosemount these next 2 years. They're going to be young, but once they get a feel for where those kids replace that state team, because that's probably what happened week 1 and 2. You're coming off your state title, very senior heavy class, and you come out just trying to feel out those first 2 weeks. But once they got things rolling with the kids that obviously they fill in with, they just took off and they won. Obviously, there's the Mankato East game, which I didn't see. That's kind of a speed bump. But then after that, they get right back to rolling. You get revenge on Mankato East and you make it to state. So maybe Maple Grove will follow that same kind of pattern because they have a lot of those leaving bodies to replace as well.
it's not that Mankato East was a bad team last year, but it's kind
No,
of
they were
just like
good.
you see this team building up to it, and I think you see the crescendo of losing Elk River by 20 and then only 2 points at the end of the season. So that's kind of why we're the loss in the middle of the season kind of throws you off, especially because it is by a decent amount. But
Yeah, but then they
yeah,
come back and they
interesting.
beat them and hold them to just 14 points in the state quarterfinals. So, or
Hmm.
I'm sorry, in the section final. So,
Yeah, interesting. That's another team I want to get out, and I didn't get out to them. One more question on 6A scheduling. Are all the 6A games going to be played on the same day, same night?
oh,
Is that not what it looked like when the schedule got released?
so let me double check on the master schedule. I just have a picture of it. I don't have access to the actual document itself. But I believe it had tentative dates on it. If I just take a peek at it here. So like almost all the games are scheduled for Thursday the first week. They're probably gonna pick like
And that's
one or
usually how
two to
it
move to
goes.
Friday.
Okay.
Um,
So that probably happens like after the fact.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. At least at Lakeville South, what we're planning on is weeks 2 through 7 are supposedly all Friday games for us, and then weeks what is it called? Weeks 1 and 8 are different. Obviously, week 1 school's not in session; we all play on Thursday, and then week 8 is MEA break. We'll play either Wednesday or Thursday, most likely. I think we talked about this in the last episode of how like a bunch of 6A teams would randomly play on a Thursday, and it was all the same teams from one section, so that whoever gets a Thursday game, you can't leave to go scout them after practice. It's all the
Yeah.
teams in your section are in the middle of play. You all play each other at the same time. You can't really do that this year, like we said, because you have an odd number of teams in the Metro South Conference, the Metro West Conference, and the Metro North Conference. All three of those have 7 teams. So you're always going to have one team that's going to be playing somebody else. So
Good.
you
So
can't.
let's get rid of it and do primetime matchups.
Saturday Night Lights, you get that prime matchup, Lakeville North, Lakeville South.
I'll
Well,
be waiting for it. Because who wouldn't want to
oh
watch that?
boy. We're
Or
gonna
any
build
other
a
game.
turf over Lake Marion and just play there. That'd be a blast.
I would be there
Oh.
for it. I can tell you that much. But um yeah, I haven't really dug like a whole lot into like in doing all this. Like there's so much changing that maybe like 3 months from now, I'm gonna think a different game is going to be a little bit better of a matchup than I'm thinking right now, just because I haven't dug totally real deep into the rosters of these
Mm-hmm.
teams. But interesting, nonetheless. I'm going to try to get out to as much as I can in terms of like events and doing as much digging as possible for 6A, and not just 6A, but all the classes.
Definitely, yeah,
But we'll get
and
to that point.
it's gonna be good. I can tell you. I was looking at the 6A film pool on Huddle today just to see who's active. Edina's watching film. North, EP, Wyzetta, Eastridge is watching film. Pretty much all the teams in the Metro East, Eastridge, Stillwater, White Bear, Woodbury, Forest Lake, all of them are watching film. And then Andover and Rogers are also getting after it. So, teams, now that they know
Can
their
you
schedules.
see? Okay, I know coaches can see the players. Can you see like other teams, or is it just like recent? Yeah, you can tell.
Yeah, so like I can just see so in order for you to be able to access the pool, you either have to upload film yourself or say you're on a bye week, which we do because obviously we're kind of on a perennial bye week.
Right.
And then your film is open, or you have access to the pool for a set number of days. Well, like for now, since I unlocked it, it's open for me until Wednesday at midnight. Once it gets to Thursday and it's game day, that rolls over, and I either have to submit film or put in for another bye week. So these are all teams, the ones I listed, that are all watching film before this coming Wednesday. So between last Thursday and now, they've been watching film.
Gotcha. Interessante.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah. Well, 2 hours, 10 minutes. Or it won't be that because I'll have to edit a little bit. But
you got another fun editing project ahead of you.
Yeah, this will be a late one tonight. But regardless, I'm glad that I'm doing it because and I think we got some good reviews of just content-wise what we're pushing out. That's the vision, trying to give these players, fans, coaches, whoever wants to listen, a little bit of content and a little bit of insight on what's going down in the landscape of Minnesota high school football.
Definitely, yeah. And once we get those lower classes, probably mid-May, end of May, once we get all those schedules, we can talk about those too.
Yeah, somebody messaged me. It's like, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make graphics for everybody because they're
so many.
I'd be just like drop dead in my room after trying to do it. I don't even know if my computer can handle all the downloads that would happen for that. But hey,
all 60 schedules for 9-man.
I'll try to do my best. No promises, but it's not. I don't want to treat the lower classes as not important as 6A just because I don't believe that's the way it is. And I feel like there is that perspective out there from some people, but I don't like it. I don't like it personally just because there is talent in every class that needs to be seen, and I want to showcase it, and that's kind of our mission. So
definitely, and you do a great job doing that, and we all appreciate it.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, yeah, thank you guys for listening. I appreciate you. I think I might split this into 2 parts and have kind of the first part and then have the draft be the second part. So you guys can split the listening up and don't have to have just a chunk 2 hours out of your day that you have to listen for, because I know we're all busy and stuff like that happens. So, yeah, it'll probably be into 2 parts. I know I'm saying this after the fact, so I'll probably go in and edit a little bit. But yeah, thank you guys for sticking around. Thank you, Coach Lantz. Like I said, go follow this guy on Instagram and on YouTube. He's got really good stuff, as you can hear if you listen to him talk for 2 hours. And thank you for joining me.
Yeah, of course. And if anyone has any recommendations for any 6A games you want me to review from last year now in the next stream, just let me know. Always taking recommendations, especially all you 5A teams that came up, Rogers, Andover, Moorhead. If you're going to need to know what your opponents do, if you want any of your teams broken down, just let me know and we'll get them looked at.
Awesome. All right. Well, have a good night, and we'll see you guys next time on the pod.
Yeah. See you later.